In late M41, following the culmination of Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade, the Ultramarines Primarch Rabute Guilliman would, against all odds, be restored to life, granting the forces of the Imperium a much-needed spark of hope during a time of encroaching darkness. Shortly after his resurrection, the Primarch would set course for the Imperial throne world of Terra in order to converse with his father, the Emperor of Mankind. After a long and grueling journey that had been fraught with both danger and conflict, which would become known within historical records as the Terran Crusade, Guilliman would finally arrive upon the throne world, discovering that the Imperial Palace had come under assault from a vast horde of demonic entities. After leading a brutal counterattack and driving the demons from Terra before they could breach the Eternity Gate, Guilliman was finally able to receive his audience with the Emperor, and would lock himself away within the Sanctum Imperialis for several days and nights. The Primarch would emerge from his father's throne room before declaring himself as the new Lord Commander of the Imperium, granting Guilliman supreme authority over any and all of the Imperium's military assets. Guilliman would then state that he intended to liberate those worlds which had fallen victim to the forces of chaos following the creation of the colossal warp rift known as the Cicatrix Maledictum, leading him to declare the onset of the Indomitus Crusade. To aid him in undertaking such a monumental task, the Primarch would enact a contingency plan that he had prepared shortly after the events of the Horus Heresy, the Primaris Project. The fruits born of the Primaris Project were that of an entirely new breed of Astartes, warriors that were not only larger, stronger, and more durable than a typical space marine, but equipped with newly developed and highly advanced forms of weaponry and armor. The initial batch of Primaris Marines would be subdivided into two groups. Half of these Primaris would be organized into 9 Legion-sized gene-mixed formations known as the Unnumbered Suns, or Grey Shields, while the remainder would be further divided into a number of chapters comprised exclusively of Primaris stock. Those chapters that were created during this particular founding would be officially designated as part of the Ultima Founding. During the course of this founding, at least 2 Primaris chapters would be created from Dark Angel's genetic stock, the Angels of Defiance and the Blades of Vengeance. While both of these chapters would go on to achieve many notable victories against the enemies of man, it currently remains unclear just how much these 2 chapters, along with any other Dark Angel successors created during this time, know in regards to the various secrets that are harbored by the other members of the Unforgiven, the collective term given to the Dark Angels and their successor chapters. Such secrets not only include the true circumstances regarding the destruction of their ancestral homeworld of Caliban, but also their hunt for the Fallen, those members of the original Dark Angels Legion that turned traitor during the course of the Horus Heresy. Since the Unforgiven chapters of the Ultima Founding will be founded by Rabute Guilliman, who for all intents and purposes is utterly unaware that a significant portion of the First Legion had turned traitor, this leads to an important question. Are any of the Ultima Founding Dark Angel successor chapters aware that the Fallen even exist? Initially, it would be reasonable to assume that any Ultima Founding chapters derived from Dark Angel's genetic stock would themselves remain unaware of the Fallen, or, at the very least, would have done so for an extended period of time. This is due to the fact that when the Dark Angels and their fellow Unforgiven chapters were first reinforced with Primaris Marines over the course of the Indomitus Crusade, they would view this newest breed of Astartes with both skepticism and suspicion, only accepting such warriors into their ranks in order to ensure that their secrets weren't uncovered through any subsequent investigations made by Guilliman or the Inquisition. Part of the reason behind this distrust was that this first wave of Primaris recruits were heavily suspected of having divided loyalties, which was split between a chapter, the Adeptus Mechanicus, who were responsible for creating and training many of the original Primaris Marines, and Rabute Guilliman himself, although later generations of Primaris that were created by the Unforgiven themselves would be more openly accepted by their older, firstborn kin. It is this very same level of concern regarding divided loyalties which prevents the officers known as Tech Marines, due to being devoted to both their chapter as well as the Adeptus Mechanicus, from ever being inducted into the ranks of their chapter's inner circle, a conclave formed of those warriors and officers who have been granted access to their chapter's innermost secrets. Because of the distrust that the Dark Angels originally harbored towards their primaris recruits, the chapter's apothecaries would routinely subject primaris marines to intensive mind-wiping procedures in the aftermath of certain battlefield operations. However, over time, the primaris marines would prove themselves to be increasingly resistant to such precautionary measures. Eventually, a primaris marine named Afaran, after holding his own against insurmountable odds upon the field of battle, would be selected to undergo the various trials that, if passed, would elevate him into the ranks of the Deathwing Company, and by extension, grant him the knowledge of the Fallen. Despite the protests of those within the inner circle, it was decided that Afaran would be granted the opportunity to undertake the rites of the Deathwing. In order to allay the concerns of his battle brothers, Azrael, the chapter's Supreme Grand Master, would not only state that Afaran's actions would determine whether or not any other primaris marines would ever be considered for the Deathwing in the future, but that he would personally oversee Afaran's evaluation. Despite the unseen burden that had been placed upon him, Afaran would successfully pass his trials, becoming the first primaris marine to be officially inducted into the ranks of the Deathwing, and in turn, the first to learn of his chapter's deepest secrets. While some members of the inner circle remained distrustful and skeptical of primaris marines in general, they would nonetheless accept Azrael's decision due to their trust and loyalty to their chapter master. However, those Unforgiven chapters created during the Ultima Founding would, at least from a cursory standpoint, appear to lack the ability to even learn about the Fallen. Because the chapters formed during this particular founding are comprised exclusively of primaris marines, then they in turn would have had no previously established members of their own respective Deathwing companies from which to learn about the Fallen. This is due to the fact that, despite the exceptional purity of their gene seed, which is commonly regarded to be second only to that of the Ultramarines in terms of genetic stability, the founding of additional Dark Angel successor chapters is in itself known to be a fairly uncommon occurrence. The reasoning for this is partly implied to be due to the fact that the Dark Angels will themselves request for additional Unforgiven chapters to be founded, as opposed to the High Lords of Terror doing so themselves. One such example of this, as detailed within the 4th edition Dark Angels Codex, is that of the Disciples of Caliban chapter, who would be created at the request of Anaziel, the then Supreme Grand Master of the Dark Angels chapter. Because of this, it is implied that the inner circles of those Unforgiven chapters that were founded at the request of the Dark Angels themselves would be personally entrusted with any information about the Fallen by none other than their parent chapter's Supreme Grand Master. By contrast, those Dark Angel successor chapters that were established during the Ultima Founding would have been founded instead by Rabute Guilliman, which would suggest that such chapters would remain blissfully unaware of the Fallen's existence. Nonetheless, there does also exist a possibility, albeit a minute one, that the inner circles of these particular chapters may have in fact been entrusted with such sensitive information. While most, if not all, of the other Unforgiven chapters will have their own inner circles, which, as mentioned earlier, are generally comprised of their chapter's most senior officers, these inner circles in turn appear to be part of a much larger series of, for lack of a better term, circles within circles. While each respective Unforgiven chapter master will bear the honorific title of Grand Master of the Inner Circle, signifying their authority over their respective chapters in matters pertaining to the Fallen, the chapter master of the Dark Angels holds the ultimate authority over all other Unforgiven chapters in this regard, which is supported by his unique title of Supreme Grand Master of the Inner Circle. As such, it wouldn't be entirely unreasonable to assume that Azrael may have met with the masters of these Ultima Founding chapters in order to inform them about the Fallen, and in turn bring them into the fold of what is essentially the Greater Inner Circle. However, if this were indeed the case, then such an action may not have occurred until after Afarin's own induction into the Deathwing, due to the inherent suspicion and distrust towards the Primaris Marines that was being harboured by the older, firstborn Astartes. While the masters of the other Unforgiven chapters may still hold reservations in regards to informing the Ultima Founding chapters about the Fallen, the Unforgiven could potentially be forced to entrust such confidential information to these newer chapters out of necessity, if nothing else. After all, it would only be a matter of time until one or more of these newer chapters encounter a member of the Fallen. If these chapters remain unaware as to what the Fallen truly are, then they could very well mistake such individuals for simply being members of the modern-day Dark Angels chapter, which in turn could potentially result in conflict should the Fallen, for one reason or another, ever choose to engage the Primaris in battle. This could then lead to the Primaris chapters asking the Unforgiven an uncomfortable number of undesirable questions regarding the Fallen, or worse, potentially going to the Inquisition with such information. Given how adamant the Unforgiven are in ensuring that none outside of their ranks learn of their traitorous forebearers, even to the point of eliminating civilian populations, agents of the Inquisition, or even lower-ranking members of their own chapter, in order to ensure that such knowledge remains hidden, then the Dark Angels and their firstborn kin may have no choice but to, somehow, purge their newly established Gene Brothers. But should such a situation ever occur, this could ultimately result in the Unforgiven inadvertently drawing even more attention and suspicion unto themselves, which by extension will increase the risk of other Imperial factions learning the truth behind their secret shame. Until one of these Primaris chapters decides to take part in the hunt for the Fallen, all we can do is speculate. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.